My friends, in today's Gospel from Mark, we hear an example of gospel arithmetic, when Jesus says, "The measure with which you measure will be measured out to you, and still more will be given to you." We measure things all the time. How much laundry soap do I put into this wash? When we measure, we strike for accuracy. We don't want too little soap, or the clothes won't be clean. We don't want too much, or the machine will explode with bubbles. We strive for accuracy with known quantities. That's our daily life math that generally works well for us. The gospel math we hear today is very, very different. Jesus doesn't just say that we will receive the measure that we measure out. He adds, "Still more will be given to you." Yes, we are to be generous in our faith. We must fully respond to the faith that God has given us. But when we are generous, God does not just return our generosity equally. God responds to us with a superabundance of grace. God calls us to be generous, yet teaches us that God gives out more than can ever be measured. Today we commemorate St. Thomas Aquinas, the angelic doctor, who did much to increase the Church's understanding of the mystery of God. A holy genius, you might say. St. Thomas knew the inexhaustible riches and generosity of God. And towards the end of his life, as he was completing his great Summa Theologica, St. Thomas received a mystical vision of God. And after this, he put down his quill and stopped writing, saying that his work was straw compared to the glory that he had seen. The great mind of St. Thomas understood more about God than perhaps anyone, and he learned that God's goodness exceeds all our measurements. St. Thomas wrote the liturgical texts for the feast of Corpus Christi, when it was first celebrated in 1264. Not only did he compose the normal prayers for the Mass, the opening prayer, the prayer over the gifts, and the concluding prayer, he also wrote a number of hymns that we sing still. In fact, at communion time today, our cantor Anne-Marie will sing from the Pange Lingua. The last two verses are very familiar to us as the Tantum Ergo, the hymn that we associate with the benediction of the Blessed Sacrament. The text I like best is the O Sacrum Convivium, a short antiphon that St. Thomas composed for evening prayer of the feast of Corpus Christi. O Sacrum Convivium, O holy banquet, it says, O holy banquet in which Christ is received, the memory of his passion is renewed, the mind is filled with grace, and a pledge of future glory is given. What a wonderful summary of our faith in the Eucharist. O holy banquet, a sacred meal in which we are given food for our Christian journey. And this food is nothing less than the body and blood of Christ himself. The power of the passion of Christ is made present for us and in us. Our minds are filled with grace, and in receiving the Eucharist, we receive a pledge, we receive a promise of the glory of heaven. Already now, as we gather around the altar, we pull up our chairs to the table of the heavenly banquet. Already now, as we celebrate the Eucharist, the bread of angels becomes our bread. The bread of angels, Panis Angelicus. Did you know that St. Thomas wrote that too? Panis Angelicus fit panis hominum. The angel's bread becomes our bread, this heavenly bread that ends all symbols. What a miraculous thing it is, the hymn says, the body of Christ will nourish us, poor and humble servants. We gather, poor and humble servants, around this table. We each have been given a measure of faith which has brought us here, and here God calls us to be generous. In return, we are given the greatest gift imaginable, the body and blood of Christ as our food, the power of Christ's passion that redeems us, and already we share in God's future. As the acclamation of faith reminds us, when we eat this bread and drink this cup, we proclaim your death until you come again. This, my friends, is gospel math. This is divine arithmetic that knows no bounds or limits.